You're scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m., and you can't stop. You know you should sleep. You know you have to wake up in 4 hours. You know this is destroying you. But you can't stop, because if you put the phone down, if you turn off the screen, you'll be alone with your thoughts. And your thoughts are the last place you want to be right now, because they're racing, spinning, replaying every mistake from the day, catastrophizing about tomorrow, comparing your life to everyone else's. Carefully curated highlight reel. And somewhere deep inside you know this isn't normal. This isn't how life is supposed to feel. Constantly anxious, constantly exhausted, constantly chasing something you can't even name. And you're not alone. Millions of Americans are lying awake right now. Successful people, attractive people, people who from the outside look like they have it all together, but inside they're falling apart. Inside they're one bad day away from a breakdown. Inside there, wondering if this is all there is, if this grinding, this hustling, this constant pressure and stress and never feeling like enough is just what adult life is. And maybe you've tried to fix it. You've read the self-help books. You've tried the meditation apps. You've gone to therapy. You've changed jobs. You've ended relationships. You've started new ones. You've moved cities. You bought things. You've achieved things. And nothing has given you the peace you're desperately searching for. Because here's what nobody's telling you. Here's the truth that's going to sound harsh, but might save your life. You're looking in the wrong place. You're trying to fix an internal problem with external solutions. You think if you just get the right job, the right partner, the right income, the right body, the right life, then you'll finally be happy, finally be at peace, finally be okay. But that's a lie. That's the lie that modern culture has sold you, and you've bought it. We've all bought it, and it's killing us, literally killing us. The suicide rates, the addiction rates, the anxiety and depression rates, they're all skyrocketing. And it's not because life is harder than it used to be. Our grandparents lived through wars and depressions and didn't have a fraction of the mental health crisis we have now. It's because we've lost something fundamental, something that ancient people understood, but we've forgotten, which is that peace doesn't come from getting what you want. Peace comes from wanting what you have, from managing your mind, from building an internal foundation that can't be shaken by external circumstances. And 2,000 years ago, a group of philosophers figured this out, not as theory, not as philosophy, but as a survival system, as a practical, daily training program for building unshakable inner peace regardless of what life throws at you. And these weren't soft academics sitting in ivory towers. These were emperors, leading armies, slaves surviving brutality, soldiers facing death, people in the absolute extremes of human experience. And they discovered something that modern self-help gurus are still trying to figure out, which is that you cannot control what happens to you, but you have absolute power over how you respond. And in that response, in that choice, that's where your freedom lives. That's where your peace lives. That's where your power lives. And the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, wrote in his private journal that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. And that's not just a pretty quote. That's a revolution. That's the key to everything. Because if your suffering comes not from circumstances, but from your judgment about circumstances, then you can change your suffering by changing your judgment. You can be peaceful in chaos, strong in adversity, free in prison. Not because you're denying reality, but because you've trained your mind to respond differently to reality. And this training, this practice, this is what Stoicism actually is. Not the emotionless robot stereotype, but emotional mastery. The ability to feel everything without being controlled by anything. To acknowledge your emotions without being ruled by them. To stay grounded when everyone around you is losing their minds. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds too good to be true. You're thinking maybe this works for ancient philosophers, but not for real life. Not for your job, your relationships, your actual problems. But here's the thing. This has been tested, brutally tested. James Stockdale, a U.S. Navy admiral, was shot down over Vietnam, held as a prisoner of war for over 7 years, tortured repeatedly, in constant pain and danger. And he survived, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And when he came home and people asked him how, he said Stoic philosophy, specifically the teachings of Epictetus. He said the prisoners who didn't make it were the optimists who kept thinking they'd be home by Christmas, and the pessimists who gave up hope entirely. The ones who survived were the ones who could face brutal reality without losing faith, who could control their minds when they couldn't control anything else, Who could choose their response when they couldn't choose their circumstances? And if it works in a Vietnamese prison camp, it'll work in your life. I promise you. And Viktor Frankl, a Jewish psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, came to the exact same conclusion independently. He watched people in the most horrific circumstances imaginable either fall apart or find meaning. And the difference wasn't in their circumstances, because they all had the same horrific circumstances. The difference was in how they responded, in the story they told themselves, in whether they let the Nazis control not just their bodies but their minds. And he wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. The same thing the Stoics were saying 2,000 years earlier, because this isn't philosophy. This is how humans actually work. This is a key to peace, to strength, to freedom, to living a life you're proud of instead of a life you're just surviving. And right now, in modern America, we need this more than ever, because we're drowning in comfort and die of anxiety. We have everything and feel nothing. We're connected to everyone and lonely as hell. We're chasing success and finding emptiness. And something has to change, not out there, not in the world, not in your circumstances, but in here, in how you think, in how you respond, in how you relate to your own life. And that's what we're going to do together right now. We're going to go deep into the ancient Stoic practices, not as history, not as theory, but as a practical training program, as a daily discipline, as a way of life that will transform you from the inside out. And I'm not promising it'll be easy. I'm not promising you'll feel better tomorrow. This isn't a quick fix. This isn't a life hack. This is real work, daily work. But I am promising that if you commit to this, if you practice these principles daily, you will change, fundamentally change. You'll be calmer in chaos, stronger in adversity, more present in your relationships, more grateful for what you have, less controlled by what you don't have, less anxious about the future, less haunted by the past, more alive in the present. And people will notice. They'll ask what changed, what happened to you, and you'll tell them nothing happened to you. You happened to yourself. You took responsibility. You did the work. You built the peace that you used to think you had to find. And by the end of this, you're going to understand why Marcus Aurelius, with all the power and wealth and options in the world, chose to practice Stoicism daily. Why he wrote to himself every night reminding himself of these principles. Because he knew that external success means nothing without internal peace, that you can have everything and be miserable, or have nothing and be at peace. And the difference is entirely in your mind, in your practice, in your daily discipline. So if you're ready, if you're tired of being tired, if you're done searching for peace in all the wrong places, if you're ready to finally do the work that actually matters, then stay with me. Because what comes next, these 9 principles, these ancient secrets, they're going to challenge everything you think you know about happiness, about success, about what it means to live a good life. And if you let them, if you really practice them, they will set you free in ways you can't even imagine right now. Not free from your circumstances, but free within your circumstances, free to choose your response, free to build your peace, free to finally, be okay regardless of what's happening around you. And that freedom, that peace, that's what the Stoics discovered. That's what they're offering you. That's what's waiting for you on the other side of this practice. So let's begin. Let's dive into the first principle, the foundation of everything, the truth that changes everything once you really understand it. You need to learn to control what you can and release what you can't, because right now, you're fighting the wrong battles, exhausting yourself trying to control things that were never yours to control, and it's destroying you, but it doesn't have to. There's another way, and you're about to discover it. Control what you can, release what you can't. Listen, I need you to understand something that most people spend their entire lives never figuring out, and it's this. You're exhausted not because you're working too hard, but because you're trying to control things that were never yours to control in the first place. Right now, as you're listening to this, there's probably something eating at you. Maybe it's a promotion you didn't get last month. Maybe it's what your coworker said in that meeting. Maybe it's your ex who moved on faster than you did. Or maybe it's just the constant noise of social media, making you feel like you're falling behind while everyone else has it all figured out. The ancient Stoics, these were men who ruled empires, survived wars, and faced death with calm eyes. They discovered something radical. That peace doesn't come from controlling your circumstances. It comes from understanding what's actually in your control and letting go of everything else. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at the time, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his personal journal that you have power over your mind, not outside events. And once you realize this, you find strength. Think about your morning commute. You're sitting in traffic, gripping the steering wheel, heart racing, cursing every car in front of you, checking the time every 30 seconds, your blood pressure rising. And here's the question. Did any of that frustration make the traffic move faster? Did your anger add even 1 minute back to your day? Of course not. But it stole your peace. It poisoned your morning. And by the time you got to work, you were already defeated. The Stoic approach is completely different. You acknowledge the traffic, you accept it as reality, and then you reclaim your mind. Maybe you listen to something meaningful. Maybe you practice gratitude. Maybe you simply breathe and realize that this moment right here is not your enemy. Your boss's mood, you can't control that, whether they slept well, whether their marriage is falling apart, whether they're under pressure from their own bosses. None of that is in your hands. But what is in your hands? How you show up, how you respond when they're unreasonable, whether you let their bad day become your bad day. Social media. This is where most people lose themselves completely, scrolling through highlight reels of other people's lives, comparing their behind-the-scenes struggle to everyone else's polished performance, feeling inadequate, anxious, jealous, angry. And here's what the Stoics would tell you. Those images, those posts, those carefully crafted stories, you can't control any of it. Not what people post, not how they live, not whether they're actually happy or just pretending. But you can control whether you pick up your phone. You can control how much time you give to that artificial world. You can control whether you measure your worth by likes and comments and follows. The Stoics divided everything in life into two categories, and this is so simple it almost sounds stupid, but it's the most liberating framework you'll ever encounter. Things you control and things you don't control. Things you control: your thoughts, your actions, your reactions, your effort, your integrity, your character, how you treat people, what you choose to focus on, how you spend your time, the words you speak, the boundaries you set. These are your dominion. This is your kingdom. Things you don't control: other people's opinions, the past, the future, the economy, your genetics, the weather, whether you get sick, whether you get the job, whether they love you back, how long you live, what happens to your reputation, pretty much everything outside your own mind and choices. And here's where it gets profound. Suffering happens at the intersection of trying to control what you can't and neglecting what you can. You spend hours worrying about whether people like you, that's outside your control, but you neglect being the kind of person you'd respect, that's inside your control. You obsess over past mistakes, completely outside your control now, but you waste the present moment where you could actually make different choices, totally within your control. You stress about whether your business will succeed, partially outside your control, market conditions, competition, luck, but you don't give your absolute best effort every single day, entirely within your control. Epictetus, who was born a slave, owned his property, beaten and crippled, somehow found more freedom in chains than most people find with unlimited choices, and he taught this principle like a mantra. Make the distinction between what's yours and what isn't. Don't desire what belongs to others. Don't try to avoid what you can't control. Focus entirely on your own actions and judgments, and you'll never be disturbed. Let me make this real for you with something every American deals with: job pressure. You're at work. Your inbox is exploding. Your deadline got moved up. Your teammate dropped the ball. Your client is threatening to walk, and you can feel the panic rising in your chest. Now, can you control whether the client stays? No, not really. They're going to do what they're going to do. Can you control whether your teammate messed up? No, it already happened. Can you control the deadline? Maybe you can negotiate, but probably not. So what can you control? You can control whether you respond with panic or with clarity. You can control whether you communicate professionally or defensively. You can control the quality of the work you put forward. You can control whether you ask for help. You can control your own preparation and focus. You can control whether you learn from this experience. And when you shift your energy entirely to what's in your control, something miraculous happens. The anxiety doesn't disappear completely, but it stops running your life, because you're no longer wasting mental energy on things you're powerless over. The Stoics weren't telling you to be passive. They weren't saying don't care about anything. They were saying care deeply about the right things. Give everything you have to what's actually yours to influence, and release your grip on everything else. This isn't easy. Your brain is wired to worry about threats, to replay the past, to catastrophize the future. Evolution built you this way, but evolution didn't prepare you for modern life where most of your threats are imaginary and most of your suffering is self-created. So you have to train yourself, and this is daily work. This is morning and night reflection, asking yourself, what am I trying to control that isn't mine to control? Where am I wasting my energy? What do I actually have power over right now? And then, this is the practice. You redirect again and again, like training a puppy, gently but firmly bringing your attention back to your sphere of control. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you notice the anger rising and you ask, can I control how they drive? No, so I release it. But can I control my reaction? Yes, so I choose calm. When your relationship ends, you notice the desperate urge to change their mind, to make them see, to fix it, and you ask, can I control whether they stay? No, I cannot force love. But can I control how I process this, how I heal, how I grow? Yes, that's mine. When the news fills you with dread about things happening across the world, you ask, can I control global events? No. But can I control whether I stay informed without drowning in helplessness? Yes. Can I control whether I take meaningful action in my own community? Yes. That's where my power lives. This is the ancient secret. Inner peace isn't found by getting everything you want. It's found by wanting what you already control over, your mind, your character, your response to life. And when you truly internalize this, when you stop exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable, you discover something the Stoics promised. You become, in the deepest sense, free. Your mind creates your suffering. Here's something that's going to sound almost offensive when you first hear it. But stay with me because once you truly understand this, it will change everything. Most of your suffering isn't caused by what's happening to you. It's caused by what you're telling yourself about what's happening to you. The Stoics had this down to science 2,000 years ago. Epictetus said it plainly. It's not events that disturb us, but our judgment about them. And Marcus Aurelius wrote his journal that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that's easy for some ancient philosophers to say, but my problems are real. My stress is justified. My anxiety has legitimate reasons. And you're right. Your challenges are real. But here's what the Stoics understood that most people miss. The event is one thing. Your interpretation of the event is something else entirely. And it's the interpretation, not the event, that's destroying your peace. Let me show you how this works in your actual life right now. Imagine you send a text message to someone you care about. Maybe it's someone you're dating. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a family member. And they don't respond. Hours go by, nothing. Now, what happens in your mind? For some people, absolutely nothing. They assume the person is busy. They go about their day. They'll hear back eventually, no big deal, but for others, and be honest if this is you, the mind starts spinning a story. They're ignoring me. They're mad at me. I said something wrong. They don't care about me anymore. Maybe they never cared. Maybe I'm not important to them. Maybe nobody actually likes me. And within minutes, you've gone from an unreturned text message to a full-blown identity crisis. Same event, two completely different experiences. And the difference isn't in the phone, it's in the mind. The text message didn't create your suffering. Your judgment about the text message created your suffering, your story, your interpretation, your meaning-making machine working overtime to turn silence into rejection. Or think about your job. Let's say your boss gives you critical feedback on a project. They point out 3 things that need improvement. Now one person hears that feedback and thinks, okay, these are specific things I can work on. This is how I get better. I appreciate the clarity. And another person hears the exact same words and spirals into, I'm terrible at my job. I'm going to get fired. I'm a failure. I shouldn't even be here. Everyone probably thinks I'm incompetent. Same boss, same words, same meeting, completely different internal experience. And that internal experience, that's where your stress lives. That's where your anxiety breeds. That's where your suffering multiplies. The Stoics weren't being philosophical or abstract about this. They were being ruthlessly practical. Because if your suffering is caused by external events, then you're powerless. You're just a victim of circumstances, blown around by whatever life throws at you. But if your suffering is caused by your judgments, by your interpretations, by the stories you tell yourself, then you have power, because you can change those judgments, you can question those stories, you can train your mind to interpret differently. Let's talk about stress for a minute. Real stress that you're probably feeling right now. Maybe it's money stress, bills piling up, not enough in the bank account, and your mind is telling you, this is a disaster, I'm failing, I'll never get ahead, I'm going to end up broken alone. But is that interpretation true? Or is the actual truth something more like, I have less money than I'd like right now, and I need to make a plan to address it? See the difference? One interpretation creates panic and paralysis. The other creates clarity and action. Same bank account, same number on the screen, completely different internal reality. Or anxiety, that constant low-level hum of dread that so many people carry around like a backpack full of rocks. What is anxiety really? It's almost always your mind projecting into the future, creating disaster scenarios that haven't happened and probably never will. You're anxious about the presentation next week, but the presentation isn't happening right now. Right now you're just sitting wherever you are, probably safe, probably fine. But your mind has time traveled to next Tuesday and invented a version of events where you humiliate yourself in front of everyone, and your career implodes, and your body, your poor body that can't tell the difference between imagination and reality, starts producing all the stress chemicals, the cortisol, the adrenaline, your heart rate increases, your palms sweat, your stomach knots up, all for something that exists only in your mind, not in reality, just in your judgment about what might happen. The Stoics would say, bring yourself back to the present. What's actually happening right now? Are you in danger right now? No? Then your mind is creating your suffering. Overthinking. This is a modern epidemic. Lie in bed at 2 a.m. replaying a conversation from 3 weeks ago, analyzing every word, every expression. What did they mean when they said that? Why did they look at me that way? What should I have said instead? And round you go. And here's the thing. That conversation is over. It's done. It's in the past. It cannot be changed. It exists now only in your memory, and your memory isn't even reliable. It's been edited and filtered and distorted by your emotions and biases. So you're not even overthinking about what actually happened. You're overthinking about your mind's reconstruction of what happened, which is about 3 steps removed from reality. And yet this mental movie you're playing is keeping you awake, stealing your peace, making you miserable. Why? Because you've judged that conversation as something that needs to be analyzed, needs to be solved, needs to be perfect. But what if you judged it differently? What if you said, I did my best in that moment with what I knew, and now it's over, and I'm going to rest. Same conversation, different judgment, different experience. Here's where this gets really powerful. The Stoics taught that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies your freedom. Something happens, that's the stimulus. You react, that's the response. But most people collapse that space. Something happens and they react instantly, automatically, no gap, no pause, no choice, just pure reaction based on old patterns, old wounds, old conditioning. But when you practice Stoicism, you widen that space, something happens and you pause, you notice, you ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this? Is the story true? Is the story helpful? Is there another way to interpret this? And suddenly you're not a puppet being jerked around by circumstances. You're a conscious human being choosing your response. Let me give you an American example that everyone can relate to. Traffic. You're stuck in traffic. You're going to be late. You can feel your blood pressure rising and your mind starts a story. This is terrible. This ruins everything. I'm going to be late and everyone's going to judge me and I might lose a client. And this city's traffic is a nightmare, and why do I even live here? And now you're suffering, genuinely suffering, angry, anxious, helpless. But pause, what if you chose a different interpretation? What if you thought traffic is part of living in a city? I can't control it. Being angry doesn't help. I'll get there when I get there. I'll send a message that I'm running late. And while I'm sitting here, I might as well listen to something interesting or just breathe and be present. Same traffic, same number of cars, same delay, but you're not suffering anymore because you change your judgment about it. The Stoics would tell you that your mind is like a fortress, and nothing can invade that fortress without your permission. Pain might knock on the door, disappointment might ring the bell, Failure might pound on walls. But suffering only gets in if you open a gate. If you say, yes, come in, take over. Tell me stories about how terrible everything is. And most people don't even realize they're doing this. They think their suffering is automatic, inevitable, just a natural result of life being hard. But it's not. It's a result of unchallenged thoughts, unexamined beliefs, automatic interpretations running on autopilot. So what do? You start practicing what the Stoics called the discipline of assent, which basically means you don't automatically believe every thought that pops into your head. A thought appears, an interpretation forms, and instead of immediately accepting it as truth, you examine it, you question it. Is this thought based on facts or assumptions? Is this interpretation the only possible interpretation? Is this story I'm telling myself helpful or harmful? Am I making this worse than it needs to be? And so often, once you actually look at your thoughts clearly, you realize they're not as solid as they seemed. They're just habits, patterns, old programming that's been running for years without you ever questioning it. Here's the ultimate truth the Stoics wanted you to understand. You cannot control what happens to you, but you have absolute dominion over what you make it mean. Life will bring loss. Life will bring disappointment. Life will bring pain. That's not optional. You don't get to vote on whether hard things happen, but you do get to vote on whether those hard things destroy you or refine you, whether they embitter you or deepen you, whether they close your heart or open it. And that choice, that power of interpretation, that's where your freedom lives. That's where your peace lives. That's the one thing no person, no circumstance, no tragedy can ever take from you unless you hand it over. So the next time you're stressed, anxious, overthinking, spiraling, pause and ask yourself one simple question. What story am I telling myself right now? And then ask, is there another story, a truer story, a more helpful story I could tell instead? Because your mind creates your suffering, which means your mind can also create your peace. Emotional strength is a skill, not a personality. There's this massive misunderstanding about Stoicism that I need to clear up right now, because it's keeping people from accessing one of the most powerful tools to living a good life. And here it is. People think Stoicism means being emotionless, being cold, being some kind of robot that doesn't feel anything, just walking through life with a blank face and a dead heart. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The Stoics weren't teaching you to suppress your emotions. They weren't telling you to pretend you don't feel pain or fear or sadness. They were teaching you something far more sophisticated and far more useful. Emotional mastery. The ability to feel your emotions fully without being controlled by them. To acknowledge what's happening inside you without letting it hijack your decisions, your relationships, your life. Marcus Aurelius felt grief when his children died. He felt it deeply, but he didn't let that grief turn him into a bitter tyrant. Seneca felt fear when Nero threatened his life. Of course he did, he was human, but he didn't let that fear make him compromise his principles or abandon his dignity. These men felt everything. They just didn't let their feelings make their decisions for them. And that distinction, that's everything. In America right now, we got this weird cultural split happening. On one side, you got the tough-it-out crowd that thinks having feelings makes you weak, that real men don't cry, that you should just push through and never admit you're struggling. And on the other side, you've got people who've been taught that every emotion is valid and should be expressed immediately, and that any attempt to regulate your emotions is toxic suppression. And both sides are missing the point. Emotional strength isn't about denying your feelings, and it's not about being ruled by your feelings. It's about being an adult in the room with your own emotions, acknowledging them, understanding them, and then choosing how to respond. Think about mental toughness for a second. What does that actually mean? In sports, in business, in the military, when people talk about mental toughness, they're talking about the ability to perform under pressure, to keep going when things get hard, to make good decisions even when you're scared or tired or discouraged. But here's what mental toughness is not. It's not pretending the pressure doesn't exist. It's not acting like you're not scared. It's not faking confidence you don't feel. Real mental toughness is feeling the fear and doing it anyway, feeling the exhaustion and taking one more step, feeling the doubt and making the decision that needs to be made. The Navy SEALs, these are some of the toughest people on the planet, and they'll tell you that their training isn't about eliminating fear. It's about functioning effectively while afraid, staying calm when your heart is pounding, thinking clearly when adrenaline is flooding your system. That's emotional mastery. That's Stoicism in action. Or look at emotional intelligence, which every company in America now says they want in their leaders. What is emotional intelligence really? It's the ability to recognize emotions in yourself and others, to understand what's driving those emotions, and to manage emotions in a way that builds relationships and achieves goals. A leader with high emotional intelligence doesn't pretend they never get frustrated or disappointed, but they don't scream at their team when a project fails. They don't make impulsive decisions when they're angry. They don't shut down and withdraw when they're hurt. They feel the frustration. They acknowledge it. Maybe they even say, "I'm frustrated right now." But then they take a breath. They get curious about what's really going on. They choose a response that's aligned with their values and their goals, not just a knee-jerk reaction to their feelings. That's what the Stoics were teaching. That's the discipline. And it's absolutely a skill, which means it can be learned, it can be practiced, it can be improved. You weren't born with a fixed amount of emotional strength. It's not like some people got the emotional resilience gene and others didn't. It's something you develop through practice, just like you develop your muscles at the gym or your skills at a craft. Every time you feel a strong emotion and you pause instead of reacting immediately, you're building that skill. Every time you notice your anger rising and you choose to take 3 deep breaths before responding, you're strengthening that muscle. Every time you feel anxiety about something and instead of spiraling, you ask yourself, what's actually in my control here? You're training yourself in emotional mastery. The Stoics had specific practices for this. They weren't just philosophizing. They were giving you a training program. One practice was called premeditatio malorum, which means imagining worst-case scenarios ahead of time. And this isn't about being pessimistic or anxious. It's about emotional preparation. If you know a difficult conversation is coming, don't just hope it goes well and then get blindsided by your emotions when it goes badly. Actually imagine how you'll feel if they get defensive, if they say something hurtful, if the conversation goes completely sideways. Imagine that scenario, feel the discomfort of it, and then decide ahead of time how you want to show up, who you want to be in that moment. Athletes do this all the time. They visualize not just success but adversity. What will I do if I'm losing at halftime? How will I respond if I miss the first shot? They're training their emotional responses in advance, so they're not caught off guard. Another Stoic practice was daily reflection. At the end of each day, sitting down and reviewing. When did I get emotionally hijacked today? When did I react instead of respond? When did I let my feelings drive my behavior in a way I'm not proud of? And this isn't about beating yourself up. It's about learning. It's about getting better. Because you can't change patterns you don't notice. Maybe you realize you always get defensive when someone questions your work. Okay, now you know. Now you can watch for that trigger. Now you can practice a different response. Or maybe you notice you shut down emotionally whenever conflict arises. You just go numb and silent. Okay, that's valuable information. Now you can work on staying present even when it's uncomfortable. The Stoics also distinguished between different types of emotions. They talked about passions, which were unhealthy emotions based on false judgments, like rage that comes from thinking someone shouldn't have done what they did, or anxiety that comes from believing you must control things you can't control. And then they talk about good feelings, which were healthy emotional responses aligned with reality and virtue, like appropriate caution that keeps you safe, or joy that comes from living according to your values. The goal wasn't feel nothing. It was to transform your emotional life from being dominated by irrational passions to being guided by wise feelings. Let's talk about calm leadership under pressure, because this is where emotional mastery becomes really visible and really valuable. Think about a crisis at work. Something goes wrong. A major client is unhappy. A project is failing. Money is being lost. And everyone's looking at the leader. What happens? If the leader panics, if they start yelling, if they spiral into blame or despair, the whole team falls apart. The crisis gets worse. Bad decisions get made in the chaos. But if the leader stays calm, not pretending everything's fine, but genuinely composed, acknowledging the problem, managing their own fear and frustration, thinking clearly about solutions, asking good questions, that calmness becomes contagious. The team steadies, people start problem solving instead of panicking, and the crisis becomes manageable. That's not a personality trait. That's a skill that leader developed, probably through years of practice, probably through lots of failures where they didn't stay calm and learn the hard way what that costs. James Stockdale, a U.S. Navy admiral who was held as a prisoner of war in Vietnam for over 7 years, tortured repeatedly, in constant danger, said that Stoic philosophy saved his life. He didn't mean it made him unfeel the pain or the fear. He meant it gave him a framework for managing those emotions, for maintaining his dignity and his sanity in conditions designed to break him. He felt everything, but he didn't let his feelings destroy him. He didn't let his captors control his inner life. And when he finally came home, he said the prisoners who struggled most were the optimists who kept thinking, we'll be out by Christmas. And then Christmas would come and go and they'd be devastated. And the pessimists who just gave up hope entirely, the ones who survived best were the ones who could acknowledge the brutal reality, feel the appropriate emotions about that reality, and yet maintain fundamental faith that they would prevail in the end. That emotional mastery, that stoicism, holding two truths at once. This is hard and I can handle it. I'm scared and I'm not going to let fear make my decisions. I'm sad and I'm going to keep going. You can apply this to your everyday life right now. You're in a relationship and your partner says something that hurts your feelings. Your immediate emotional reaction might be to snap back, to say something equally hurtful, to shut down and give them the silent treatment. Those are all understandable emotional impulses, but are they wise? Are they going to improve the relationship? Probably not. Emotional mastery would look like this. Feeling the hurt, acknowledging to yourself, okay, that stung. I feel hurt right now. Taking a breath, getting curious about what's really happening. Maybe they didn't mean it the way you took it. Maybe they're stressed about something else. Maybe you're sensitive about this topic for reasons that have nothing to do with them, and then responding from a place of clarity instead of pure reaction, maybe saying, hey, when you said that, it hurt my feelings. I don't think you meant it that way, but I wanted you to know how it landed for me. That's strong, that's mature, that's emotional intelligence in action. Or you're at work and you get passed over for a promotion you really wanted. You're going to feel disappointed, maybe angry, maybe like a failure. Those feelings are valid, they're normal. You're not broken for feeling them, but what do you do with those feelings? Do you let them turn into bitterness? Do you start bad-mouthing your boss or the person who got promoted? Do you mentally check out and stop trying? Or do you feel the disappointment fully? Maybe even take a day to be genuinely sad about it, and then ask yourself, okay, what can I learn from this? What feedback can I get? What skills do I need to develop? How do I want to move forward from here? Same disappointment, completely different trajectory, and the difference is emotional mastery. The beautiful thing about understanding that emotional strength is a skill is that it means you're not stuck. You're not doomed to always be reactive or anxious or emotionally fragile. You can get better at this, starting today, starting with the very next emotion that shows up. You can practice the pause between feeling and acting. You can practice naming your emotions instead of just being swept away by them. You can practice asking yourself, what would the wise version of me do right now? You can practice staying present with uncomfortable emotions instead of immediately trying to escape them through distraction or numbing. And gradually, over time, you'll notice something shifting. Emotions that used to completely overwhelm you become more manageable. Situations that used to trigger you lose their power. You find yourself able to stay grounded even when everything around you is chaos. And people start coming to you when things get hard because they know you won't fall apart. They know you can handle it. That's what the Stoics promise. That's what emotional mastery gives you. Not a life without feelings, but a life where your feelings don't run the show, where you can feel everything and still show up as the person you want to be, where your emotions inform you but don't control you. And that kind of strength, that kind of freedom, that's available to anyone willing to practice. Because emotional strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build one moment, one choice, one breath at a time. Detach from outcomes, commit to effort. This is probably the hardest Stoic principle to swallow in modern America, especially right now when hustle culture is screaming at you from every podcast, every Instagram post, every success guru telling you that you need to be obsessed with results, that you need to manifest your dreams, that champions are made by wanting it more than everyone else. And look, I get the appeal of that message. It's intoxicating. It makes you feel like if you just want something badly enough, if you just work hard enough, if you just believe enough, you can have anything. But here's what nobody tells you. That mindset is a setup for misery because it makes your peace, your happiness, your sense of self-worth completely dependent on outcomes you don't fully control. And the Stoics understood something that modern hustle culture refuses to admit, which is that you could do everything right and still lose. You can give your absolute best and still fail. You could be the most talented, most prepared, most dedicated person in the room and still not get the result you wanted. And if your identity and happiness are tied to outcomes, you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of anxiety and disappointment. The Stoic approach is radically different, and it goes like this. Commit everything to process. Give 100% to your effort, to your preparation, to showing up with excellence and integrity, and then release your attachment to the outcome. Do your absolute best, and then make peace with however it turns out, because the outcome was never fully yours to control anyway. Now, before you think this is just some way of letting yourself off the hook, some excuse for mediocrity, let me be crystal clear. This is not about lowering your standards. It's not about not caring. It's not about half-assing things and then shrugging when you fail. It's actually the opposite. It's about caring so deeply about what you can control, your effort, your character, your process, that you don't have any energy left to waste on worrying about what you can't control, which is the final result. Let me show you what this looks like in real life, starting with sports, because sports are the perfect laboratory for this principle. Think about a basketball player standing at the free throw line in the final seconds of a championship game. The score is tied. Everything comes down to this shot. Now, if that player is attached to the outcome, if they're thinking, I have to make this, my whole career depends on this, everyone's watching, I can't let my team down, I can't miss, what happens? Their muscles tense up, their breathing gets shallow, anxiety floods their system, and they're way more likely to miss because they're not present with the process. They're lost in fear about the outcome. But if that player is trained in the Stoic way, they're thinking something completely different. They're thinking, I've practiced this shot 10,000 times. I know my form. I know my routine. All I can do is execute the process I've trained, take the breath, bend the knees, follow through. The ball either goes in or it doesn't. That part is not in my control. Physics and probability, and 100 tiny variables will determine that. But my form, my focus, my effort, that's mine, so I'm going to give my best right now and let the outcome be what it is. And paradoxically, that player is way more likely to make the shot because they're relaxed, they're present, they're executing the process without the interference of outcome anxiety. Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest basketball player ever, missed more than 9,000 shots in his career. He lost almost 300 games. 26 times he was trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. And he said, I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. He understood that you can't control whether the ball goes in. You can only control your preparation, your effort, your willingness to take the shot. And if you make your peace with the process, if you detach from outcomes, you're free to perform at your highest level without the weight of desperate need crushing you. Or look at business, which is where this principle becomes really practical for most people. You're building a startup. You're pouring your heart and soul into this thing, working 16-hour days, sacrificing time with your family, betting everything on this vision. And modern hustle culture tells you that if you want it bad enough, if you work hard enough, you'll succeed. Failure only happens to people who didn't want enough, who didn't work hard enough. But that's a lie. That's a comfortable lie that successful people tell themselves to feel like they earned everything, and unlucky people tell themselves to feel like they could have controlled it. The truth is that most startups fail, not because the founders didn't work hard, not because they didn't care, but because of timing, because of market conditions, because of competition, because 1,000 variables that are outside anyone's control didn't line up the right way. And if you've attached your entire identity and happiness to your startup succeeding, when it fails, you don't just lose a business, you lose yourself, you fall into depression. You think you're a failure as a person, you can't see any path forward. But if you approach it the Stoic way, you go in knowing, I'm going to give this everything I have. I'm going to work with integrity. I'm going to learn and adapt and execute to the best of my ability. And I'm going to build something I'm proud of regardless of whether it makes me rich or famous. And if it fails, that doesn't mean I failed. It means I tried something hard and it didn't work out. And I'll take what I learned and apply it to the next thing. Steve Jobs got fired from Apple, the company he founded. Can you imagine? And for a while he was devastated. But then he started Pixar and Next, and eventually came back to Apple and led it to become the most valuable company in the world. And he later said that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to him because it freed him from the weight of being successful and let him be a beginner again. Let him focus on the process of creating rather than the outcome of maintaining. That's detachment from outcomes. That's Stoic wisdom in the business world. Let's talk about career, because this is where most Americans are suffering right now. You want the promotion. You've been working toward it for years. You've done everything right. You've hit all your numbers. You've gone above and beyond. And then they give it to someone else, maybe someone less qualified, maybe someone who just happened to be in the right place at the right time, maybe someone who's better at office politics. And you're crushed, you're bitter, you feel like all that effort was wasted. And here's where the Stoic perspective is so liberating. Your effort was not wasted, not even a little bit, because the value of effort is not determined by the outcome. The value of effort is intrinsic. You became more skilled, more disciplined, more capable through that effort. You showed up with integrity and excellence, and that is value regardless of whether you got a promotion. The promotion was never fully in your control. Your boss's decision, the company's politics, the timing, the budget, 100 factors you. Outcomes actually end up achieving more, not because the universe rewards attachment, but because detachment removes the psychological interference that comes from desperate need. When you need something too badly, when your happiness depends on getting it, you show up tense, anxious, trying too hard, and people can feel that energy. It's off-putting, it makes you less effective. But when you've committed to the process and release the outcome, you show up relaxed, confident, focus on adding value rather than on getting something, and that energy is magnetic. That's when you do your best work. The Stoics called this voluntary fatalism, which sounds dark, but it's actually incredibly freeing. It means you recognize that the outcome is going to be what it's going to be. Fate, luck, circumstance. Call it what you want. There's a huge element of how things turn out that's beyond your control, and you can fight against that reality and make yourself miserable, or you can accept it and focus entirely on what is in your control, which is how you show up, how you try, what kind of person you are in the process. Seneca wrote to a friend who was devastated about not being chosen for a political position, and he said, "You can lose the position, but you cannot lose the excellence with which you pursued it. You can lose the title, but you cannot lose the character you demonstrated in the attempt." That's the point. Your worth is not determined by outcomes. It's determined by effort, by integrity, by who you are in the arena, not by what the scoreboard says when the game ends. Let me give you a personal example that a lot of Americans will relate to. You apply for your dream job. You make it through multiple rounds of interviews. You prepare like crazy. You give the best interview of your life. You can feel it. This is it. This is the one. And then you get the email. We decided to go with another candidate. And you feel like you got punched in the stomach. All that hope, all that effort for nothing. But here's the Stoic reframe. Was it for nothing? You practiced interviewing. You got clearer on what you want. You pushed yourself to articulate your value. You showed up courageously even though you might get rejected. You grew. You tried. You put yourself out there. That has enormous value. And the fact that this particular job didn't work out doesn't erase that value. Maybe this job wasn't actually right for you. Maybe there's something better coming that you can't see yet. Maybe the person they hired will crash and burn, and they'll come back to you. Maybe none of that will happen and you'll find something else. The point is you did your part. You control what you can control, and the rest was never yours to control anyway. So why torture yourself over it? The alternative, the modern hustle culture way, is to tell yourself, I didn't want it bad enough. I didn't work hard enough. Winners find a way. And that might feel motivating in a moment, but it's also a recipe for burnout and self-hatred, because there will always be times when you do want it badly. You do work hard, and you still don't get it. And then what? Then you got no framework for making sense of that except to blame yourself, to think you're defective, to lose faith in yourself. The Stoic way lets you give your absolute best without the crushing weight of needing a specific outcome. And that's actually when humans perform at their peak, when they're fully committed to the process but not desperately attached to the result. Olympic athletes talk about this all the time, how the pressure of needing to win the gold medal can destroy your performance. But if you can focus on executing your race, your routine, your technique, and genuinely make peace with whatever medal you get or don't get, that's when you're most likely to actually win, because you're not tight, you're not overthinking, you're just flowing, just executing what you've trained. Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, had the most high-stakes job imaginable, decisions that affected millions of lives, wars, plagues, political intrigue, and he wrote his journal. You have power over your actions, not over their outcomes. Do what's right. Do your duty with excellence, and then let the gods handle the rest. Or in modern secular language, do your part and then trust the process. Trust that if you consistently show up with integrity and effort, your life will unfold as it should. Maybe not as you planned, maybe not on your timeline, But you'll be okay because your peace isn't conditional on specific outcomes. Your peace comes from knowing you're living according to your values. You're giving your best. You're showing up with character. So what does this actually look like in practice? It means you prepare for the job interview, like your life depends on it. And then you walk in there with a mindset of, I'm going to show them the best version of me. I'm going to be genuine and confident and present. And whether they hire me or not is up to them. It means you train for the marathon with everything you have. And then on race day, you run your race. You honor the training you put in, and you cross the finish line, knowing you gave it everything regardless of your time. It means you launch the business with full commitment, knowing it might fail, and deciding that the attempt itself is worthwhile, that who you become in the process of trying is valuable regardless of the outcome. It means you ask someone out, knowing they might say no, and being okay with that because at least you were brave enough to try. It means you create the art, write the book, start the podcast, put your work out there, knowing it might get ignored or criticized, and doing it anyway because the act of creating is where the value lives, not in the applause or the sales numbers. This is so contrary to everything modern culture teaches. We're told that results are all that matter, that second place is just a first loser, that you should be obsessed with winning, that participation trophies are destroying America, and look, I'm not saying excellence doesn't matter. I'm not saying you shouldn't try to win. I'm saying your peace and your work cannot be conditional on winning, because winning is not fully in your control. And if you make your happiness dependent on things outside your control, you're choosing to be anxious and miserable. You're volunteering for suffering. The Stoic way is to fall in love with the process, to find joy and meaning in the effort itself, in the discipline, in the growth, in showing up with integrity, and to view outcomes as preferred but not required. Of course, you'd rather get the promotion than not get it. Of course, you'd rather win a game than lose it. But your fundamental peace, your sense of self-worth, your ability to keep going, that doesn't change based on the outcome, because you know that you control what you could. Control, you did your part, and that's enough. That has to be enough, because it's all you ever really have. Practice breathing through discomfort instead of panicking. You're literally training your nervous system to handle stress better. You're teaching your body and mind, I can be uncomfortable and still be okay. I can be in a challenging situation and not freak out. And that training transfers to everything else in your life. When you get bad news at work, when someone confronts you, when life throws you a curveball, you got this deep reservoir of, I've been uncomfortable before and survived it. I can handle this. People who've never practiced voluntary discomfort, they fall apart at the first sign of difficulty because they have no reference point for being uncomfortable and being okay. Every discomfort feels like an emergency. Every challenge feels insurmountable because they spent their whole lives avoiding discomfort, arranging everything for maximum ease and convenience. The Stoics would also practice voluntary poverty. They go without luxuries for a period of time, not because luxury is bad, but to prove to themselves that they didn't need it. Seneca would tell wealthy people set aside a certain number of days each month to be content with very little food and inexpensive clothing, and ask yourself, is this what I used to dread? Because most of our fear about losing our wealth, our status, our comfort, that fear is based on imagination. We think it would be unbearable. We think we couldn't handle it. But when you actually practice it voluntarily, when you spend a weekend living like you're poor, eating cheap food, wearing old clothes, entertaining yourself with nothing, you realize it's not that bad. It's uncomfortable, sure, but you're okay. You're still you. Your worth doesn't come from your possessions, and that realization breaks the power that fear had over you. Think about how much anxiety Americans carry about money, about losing their job, about their lifestyle being threatened, and a huge part of that anxiety is a terror of discomfort, the assumption that if they had to downgrade their lifestyle, it would be devastating. But what if you practiced it? What if one month you lived on a poverty budget, ate the cheapest food, didn't spend money on entertainment? Just to prove to yourself you could do it, you'd realize, okay, it's not fun. I prefer having money, but I'd survive, I'd be okay. And suddenly that fear loses its grip on you. Suddenly you're not making desperate decisions, staying in jobs you hate, tolerating treatment you shouldn't tolerate, all because you're terrified of discomfort. This is mental training. This is psychological strength building, and it's incredibly practical. Athletes understand this instinctively. They don't get strong by staying comfortable. They get strong by progressively challenging themselves, by deliberately doing hard things, by pushing past their comfort zone again and again. A runner doesn't get faster by only running at a comfortable pace. They do interval training. They push into the pain. They practice being uncomfortable, and their body adapts, gets stronger, gets more capable. Your mind works the exact same way. You don't build mental resilience by avoiding difficulty. You build it by practicing difficulty in manageable doses, by voluntarily choosing discomfort, so that when involuntary discomfort shows up, and it will, you're ready. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation, the idea that exposure to a small amount of stress in a safe context builds your capacity to handle bigger stresses later. It's why exposure therapy works for phobias. It's why military training involves deliberately difficult conditions. It's what the Stoics figured out 2,000 years ago through philosophy and practice. Let me give you some practical examples of voluntary discomfort you can start today. Take cold showers. Start with just 30 seconds at the end of your normal shower. Just turn to cold and breathe through it. Every day you're training yourself to stay calm in discomfort, to not panic, to realize you can handle things that are unpleasant. Fast occasionally. Skip a meal or two. Let yourself feel hungry. Notice that hunger is just a sensation. It's not an emergency. You're not going to die. You can function while hungry. And this breaks the tyranny of constant eating, constant snacking, the belief that you need to immediately satisfy every craving. Sleep on the floor once in a while. Or if that's too much, just make your bed less comfortable, use fewer pillows, a thinner blanket, practice sleeping in less than ideal conditions, so that when you travel or circumstances aren't perfect, you're not completely thrown off. Exercise intensely. Push yourself past what's comfortable. Practice being out of breath, being physically exhausted, being sore, because that builds not just physical strength but mental toughness. Every time you choose to do another rep when you want to quit, you're building the discipline muscle. Sit with boredom. Don't immediately grab your phone the second you have nothing to do. Practice just sitting, just being present, just being bored, because constant stimulation is making us incapable of being with ourselves, incapable of thinking, incapable of processing our lives, and the discomfort of boredom is actually valuable. It's where creativity comes from, where self-reflection happens, where peace is found. Say no to conveniences sometimes. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Walk instead of driving. Do things a hard way occasionally. Not because the hard way is better, but because you're practicing not needing everything to be easy. You're maintaining your capability, your self-reliance. The Navy SEALs have this saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's, external success will never fix inner chaos. Let me tell you something that's going to save you years of chasing the wrong thing, years of suffering, years of wondering why achievement doesn't feel the way you thought it would. External success will never, ever fix internal chaos. And this is a lie that modern America is built on, the lie that's keeping millions of people on a hamster wheel of achievement and acquisition, always thinking that the next milestone will finally bring peace. The next promotion will finally make them feel worthy. The next amount of money will finally make them feel secure. The next level of fame or followers or recognition will finally make them feel loved. And it never does, because the problem was never external. The problem is internal, and no amount of external validation or accomplishment can fix a fundamentally disturbed mind. The Stoics understood this at a level that most people never reach. They saw clearly that peace is an inside job, that if your mind is chaotic, if you're driven by insecurity and fear and the need to prove yourself, if you're running from pain or emptiness or self-hatred, then success doesn't heal those things. Success just gives you more resources to avoid dealing with them, more distractions, more ways to numb yourself. But the wound is still there. Actually, it often gets worse because now you've achieved what you thought would fix you and you're still broken, still anxious, still empty. And that realization can be devastating. Think about the stereotypical story we see playing out over and over in America right now. Someone grows up feeling not good enough. Maybe their parents didn't show them love. Maybe they were bullied. Maybe they just internalized a message that they needed to achieve to be worthy. And so they dedicate their life to success. They work insane hours. They sacrifice relationships. They sacrifice their health. They sacrifice present moment joy, all for this future moment when they'll finally make it. And then they'll be happy. Then they'll be at peace. Then they'll feel worthy. And they climb and climb and climb. And maybe they actually get there. Maybe they get the corner office, the 7-figure salary, the impressive title, the social media following, the recognition. And for about 2 weeks, it feels amazing, the validation, the achievement, they did it, they made it. But then, and this is the part nobody talks about, the anxiety comes back, the emptiness comes back, the inner critic, comes back, because those things were never about external circumstances. They were about internal patterns, unresolved wounds, a fundamental relationship with yourself that was broken. And success didn't fix it. Success just revealed that it was never about success in the first place. Marcus Aurelius wrote something devastating in his private journal. He said, everything you're running toward, thinking it will make you happy, people have already achieved those things, and they're miserable. He was the emperor of Rome. He had literally the most powerful position in the world, unlimited wealth, ultimate status. And he was telling himself, don't think that more power or more success will give you peace, because I have all of it, and I still have to do the inner work. I still have to manage my mind. I still have to practice virtue and wisdom. The external circumstances didn't solve anything. And we see this pattern everywhere in modern America. Celebrities who seem to have everything, fame, money, beauty, adoration from millions, and they're battling addiction, depression. They're checking into rehab. Some of them are taking their own lives, and everyone's confused. How could someone with everything be so unhappy? And the answer is because external success doesn't create internal peace. If anything, it often amplifies internal chaos, because now you have no excuse. You can't tell yourself, I'll be happy when I'm successful, because you are successful and you're still miserable, and that's a dark place to be. The burnout epidemic in America right now is directly related to this misunderstanding. People are working themselves into the ground, destroying their mental health, their physical health, their relationships, and for what? For a promotion that they think will finally make them feel accomplished, for a salary that they think will finally make them feel secure, for a level of achievement that they think will finally make them feel worthy. But it doesn't work that way. It has never worked that way. You cannot earn your way out of an internal sense of unworthiness. You cannot achieve your way out of anxiety. You cannot accumulate your way out of emptiness. Those are internal conditions that require internal work, not external solutions. Seneca, who was incredibly wealthy, wrote about this constantly. He'd see people destroying themselves in pursuit of wealth, and he'd say, look, I have wealth. I can tell you from experience that it doesn't do what you think it does. It's nice to have, sure, it's better than being poor, but it doesn't give you peace. It doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't solve your internal problems. In fact, it often creates new problems, new anxieties, new attachments. Now you're worried about losing what you have. Now you're dealing with people who want something from you. Now you have more complicated decisions and responsibilities. And if you haven't done the inner work, if your mind is still disturbed, wealth just gives you more expensive ways to be disturbed. And this is an ancient philosophy. This is validated by modern research. Studies on lottery winners show that after an initial spike, their happiness returns to baseline, sometimes even drops below baseline. Studies on high achievers show high rates of anxiety and depression. The hedonic treadmill is real. You adapt to whatever level of success or wealth or status you achieve. And then you're back to your baseline level of happiness or unhappiness, which is determined not by your external circumstances, but by your internal state, your mindset, your mental habits, your relationship with yourself. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in corporate America right now. You've got someone working 60, 70 hours a week, constantly checking email, always available, always hustling. And you ask them why. Why are you doing this to yourself? And they'll say, I'm building something. I'm working toward a goal. Once I make VP, once I hit this income level, once I prove myself, then I'll relax, then I'll have balance, then I'll be happy. But here's what actually happens. They make VP and the goalposts move. Now they need to make SVP. Now they need to make C-suite, or they hit the income level and it doesn't feel like enough. They thought 6 figures would feel secure. But now they're around people making 7 figures and they feel poor again. They thought the title would make them feel important, but now they're just stressed about maintaining the title, about not losing it, about justifying it. And they're more anxious than ever, working even longer hours, feeling even more pressure, and they can't understand why the thing they thought would free them has actually imprisoned them more. The Stoics would say this is because you sought external solutions to internal problems. You thought status would fix insecurity, but insecurity is a relationship with yourself. It's a voice in your head telling you you're not enough, and that voice doesn't care about your title. It'll just find new reasons why you're not enough. You thought money would fix anxiety about scarcity, but anxiety about scarcity comes from a fearful relationship with the future, from not trusting yourself to handle whatever comes. And more money doesn't build that trust. Only inner work builds that trust. only proving to yourself through practice that you can be okay regardless of circumstances. That's what builds real security. And followers, let's talk about social media because this is where the delusion is most obvious and most toxic. People are literally destroying their mental health chasing follower counts, chasing likes, chasing engagement, thinking that if they can just build a big enough audience, get enough validation, enough attention, then they'll feel worthy, then they'll feel loved, then they'll feel like they matter. And it's so backwards, it's so sad. Because the more you chase external validation, the more you're confirming to yourself that you're not enough as you are, that your worth is contingent on other people's approval. And even if you get the followers, even if you go viral, even if you become Instagram famous, you're still going to bed at night with the same insecure mind, the same need for approval, except now at worse because you need to maintain it. You need to keep feeding the algorithm, keep performing, keep getting validation. Because the second it stops you feel worthless, your worth has become completely dependent on metrics that are outside your control, on the opinions of strangers who don't even know you. And that's not freedom, that's prison. That's making yourself completely vulnerable to things you cannot control. Marcus Aurelius, again, Emperor of Rome, loved by millions, feared by millions, recognized everywhere he went, wrote his journal, how much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself, to make it just and holy. He's saying stop looking outside yourself for validation. Stop measuring your worth by what other people think. Focus on being a person of character, on living according to your values, on being someone you respect. And let that be enough, because it has to be enough, because external validation is a drug that requires higher and higher doses and never actually satisfies the craving. The path forward, the Stoic path, is to do the internal work first, or at least simultaneously with external ambition. To ask yourself, why do I want success? What am I really looking for? Am I trying to prove something? Am I trying to earn love? Am I trying to feel worthy? Am I running from something? And to address those internal needs directly, not through achievement, but through therapy, through self-reflection, through healing old wounds, through building a healthy relationship with yourself, through practicing self-compassion, through developing inner peace that's not conditional on external circumstances. This doesn't mean don't be ambitious. The Stoics weren't against achievement or success. Marcus Aurelius led an empire. Seneca was a successful writer and advisor. They had external success, but they didn't need it for their internal peace. They could have lost it all and still been okay because their worth, their peace, their sense of self, that wasn't dependent on external conditions. It was built on internal foundations, on virtue, on character, on wisdom, on relationships with themselves, and with living according to nature and reason. In modern terms, this means pursue your career goals, build your business, create your art, achieve what you want to achieve, but do it from a place of wholeness, not from a place of lack. Do it because it's interesting, because it's challenging, because it allows you to contribute, because it's an expression of who you are, not because you think it will finally make you feel worthy or loved or secure, because it won't. That work has to happen separately. That work is internal. And until you do that work, success will just be another burden, another thing you have to maintain, another source of anxiety rather than joy. Think about burnout for a second. Really think about it. Burnout isn't just about working too many hours. Plenty of people work long hours doing things they love, and they're energized by it. Burnout happens when you're working hard at something while simultaneously fighting an internal battle, while simultaneously trying to prove your worth, while simultaneously running from feelings of inadequacy or fear or emptiness. That internal conflict, that's what burns you out. That's what makes the work feel unbearable. And so people think the solution is to work less, to take a vacation, to quit their job. And sometimes it helps temporarily. But if the internal chaos is still there, if you still have a disturbed mind, you'll just bring that disturbance to the next job, the next relationship, the next city, the next chapter of your life. The real solution, the Stoic solution, is to address the internal chaos directly, to sit with it, to understand it, to heal it, to build a relationship with yourself that's not based on achievement or approval or external validation, to develop inner peace as a practice, as a discipline, as something you cultivate daily through meditation, through journaling, through questioning your thoughts, through practicing gratitude, through living according to your values, and then from that place of inner stability. You can pursue external goals, but now they're preferences, not needs. You like to achieve them, but your peace doesn't depend on them. You can work hard, but you're not desperate. You can be ambitious, but you're not attached. And that's when success actually becomes enjoyable, when it's not carrying the weight of having to fix you, when it's just success, just achievement, just an interesting challenge and an expression of your capabilities, not a desperate attempt to earn worth or love or security that you should have given yourself all along. The tragedy of modern American culture is that we got it completely backwards. We tell people sacrifice everything for success, work yourself to death, destroy your health and relationships, and then once you make it, you can be happy, you can rest, you can have peace. But it doesn't work that way. You cannot postpone peace until some future achievement. Peace is now or never. Peace is an internal condition that you develop regardless of external circumstances. And until you understand that, until you do that work, all the success in the world will just be fuel for more anxiety, more pressure, more fear of losing what you've gained, more emptiness dressed up in expensive clothes and fancy titles. And you'll spend your whole life climbing a ladder only to realize at the top that it was leaning against a wrong wall, that what you were really searching for was never at the top of any ladder. It was inside you all along, waiting for you to stop running, and finally turn inward and do the work that actually matters. Choose your response. That's true freedom. Listen to me carefully, because this is the most liberating truth you'll ever hear, and it's something that can change your life in the next 5 minutes if you really let it sink in. You are not free because you can do whatever you want. You're not free because you have money or status or options. You're free, truly free, in the deepest sense of the word, when you understand that regardless of what happens to you, regardless of what anyone does to you, regardless of what circumstances you find yourself in, you always have the power to choose your response. And that power, that space between what happens and how you respond, that's where your real freedom lives. That's the one thing no person, no government, no circumstance can ever take from you unless you give it away. The Stoics were obsessed with this idea because many of them lived through times of extreme oppression, persecution, exile, slavery, and they discovered that even when everything external was stripped away, even when they had no control over their circumstances, they still had this one irreducible freedom, the freedom to choose how they would respond, the freedom to choose what meaning they would make, the freedom to choose who they would be in the face of whatever life threw at them. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave, literally owned his property, beaten, crippled, with no control over his body, his time, his life, can't understand that his master could control his physical circumstances, but could not control his mind unless he allowed it. And he taught, the chief task in life is simply this, to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control, and where. Then do I look for good and evil, not to uncontrollable externals, but within myself to the choices that are my own. He's saying your power doesn't lie in controlling what happens. Your power lies in controlling how you respond to what happens. And once you truly internalize that, you become unshakable, because nobody can take that power from you. Let me make this real for you right now in modern American life, because this isn't abstract philosophy. This is the most practical thing you'll ever learn. Your boss treats you unfairly, criticizes you in front of others, takes credit for your work, makes your work life miserable. Now you cannot control your boss. You cannot control their behavior, their mood, their character. They can control your schedule, your projects, maybe even whether you keep your job. But here's what they absolutely cannot control. They cannot control whether you let their behavior define your worth. They cannot control whether you respond with dignity or desperation. They cannot control whether you let their dysfunction make you dysfunctional. They cannot control your integrity, your character, how you treat other people, whether you do excellent work regardless of recognition, whether you maintain your self-respect, whether you start looking for a better situation. Those choices are yours, always yours. And in those choices, in that response, that's where your freedom lives. That's where your power lives. They can control your job, but they cannot control your mind unless you hand them that power, unless you give them rent-free space in your head, unless you let them steal your peace. And so many people do. So many people give away their power without even realizing it. They let someone else's bad behavior control their emotions, their thoughts, their entire state of being. They go home angry. They can't sleep. They complain to their spouse. They obsess about it. They let it poison their evening, their weekend, their life. And the person who treated them badly isn't even thinking about them, doesn't care, has moved on, but they've surrendered their internal freedom. They've let someone else's choices determine their inner state. And that's voluntary slavery. That's choosing to be controlled. Or think about this scenario that plays out 1,000,000 times a day in America. Someone cuts you off in traffic, doesn't use their signal, almost causes an accident, and you can feel the rage rising, your heart pounding. And you have a choice in this moment. You can let that rage take over, you can scream, you can honk, you can tailgate them, you can flip them off, you can let it ruin your morning, let your blood pressure spike, let it put you in a foul mood that you carry into work, into your interactions with people who had nothing to do with it, or you can choose a different response. You can take a breath. You can recognize this person driving badly has nothing to do with me. They're probably stressed or distracted or just a bad driver. Getting angry doesn't change anything, doesn't make me safer, doesn't teach them a lesson. It just hurts me, just steals my peace. And you can let it go. You can choose calm. And that choice, that's freedom. That's power, the power to not be jerked around by every external circumstance, by every other person's behavior. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, who endured unimaginable horror, starvation, brutality, watching his family murdered, he observed something profound. The Nazis could control everything external. They could control his body, his circumstances, whether he lived or died, but they could not control his response unless he let them. They could not force him to become hateful, bitter, broken. And he wrote after surviving that between stimulus and response there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. He's saying the same thing the Stoics said 2,000 years earlier. Your freedom isn't in your circumstances. Your freedom is in your response. And the moment you understand that, the moment you practice that, circumstances lose their power over you. Other people lose their power over you. You're no longer a victim of external events. You're a conscious agent choosing your response. Now here's where this gets challenging, because choosing your response doesn't mean you're always going to choose perfectly. Doesn't mean you won't get angry or hurt or scared. You're human. Emotions happen. But it means you recognize that between the emotion arising and your action, there's a gap. There's a choice point. The emotion isn't the problem. The problem is when you unconsciously, automatically react from the emotion without any awareness, without any choice. When someone insults you, and you immediately insult them back. When something bad happens and you immediately spiral into catastrophizing, when someone disappoints you and you immediately write them off, those are unconscious reactions. Those are stimulus response with no space, no freedom. You're like a puppet being controlled by external circumstances. But when you practice creating space, when you notice the emotion, name it, I'm feeling angry right now, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling scared. And then you pause, even just for 3 seconds, and you ask yourself, how do I want to respond to this? What response would I respect? What response is aligned with who I want to be? That's freedom. That's power. That's being human rather than being reactive. Let me give you another American example that's incredibly relevant right now. Social media. Someone posts something political that you completely disagree with, something that feels offensive, ignorant, harmful, and you can feel the urge to respond, to correct them, to tell them how wrong they are, to defend your position, and you have a choice. You can react immediately, fire off a response, get into an argument that's going nowhere, feel your stress levels rise, waste an hour of your life, damage a relationship, accomplish nothing, or you can pause and recognize, I can't control what they believe, I can't control what they post, but I can control whether I engage, I can control whether I let this disturb my peace, I can control whether I respond, and if so, how I respond. And maybe you decide to just keep scrolling. Maybe you decide to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Maybe you decide this isn't worth your energy. But the key is you're choosing, you're not being controlled by the stimulus. You're exercising your freedom to respond in a way that's aligned with your values and your well-being. The Stoics had a practice for this. They called it the discipline of assent, which basically means don't automatically agree with every impression that appears in your mind. Something happens, an interpretation forms. This is terrible, this is unfair, this is insulting, and instead of immediately accepting that interpretation as truth and reacting from it, you examine it, you question it. Is this interpretation accurate? Is it helpful? Is there another way to see the situation? And you choose which interpretation to accept, and from that chosen interpretation comes your response. And suddenly you're not a victim of circumstances. You're an active participant in creating your experience. Here's what this looks like in relationships, which is where most people struggle with this the most. Your partner says something that hurts your feelings. Maybe they're critical, maybe they're dismissive, maybe they're just in a bad mood and take it out on you. And your immediate impulse might be to get defensive, to criticize them back, to shut down, to punish them with silence. Those are all reactive responses. Those are stimulus response with no space, no choice, and those responses usually make things worse. They escalate the conflict. They damage the relationship. But if you can create space, if you can feel the hurt and pause before reacting, you can choose a different response. You can say, when you said that it hurt my feelings, I don't think you meant it that way, but I want you to know how it landed for me. That's a chosen response. That's a response that comes from your values, from wanting to improve the relationship, rather than just winning the moment, from being the person you want to be rather than being controlled by your immediate emotional reaction. And here's the powerful thing. When you start practicing this, when you start choosing your responses rather than being controlled by your reactions, you start to notice how much of your suffering was self-created, how much of your stress was coming not from your circumstances, but from your unconscious reactions to your circumstances. You start to realize, I've been giving away my power my entire life, letting other people's behavior control my emotions, letting circumstances I can't control steal my peace, letting my own unconscious reactions run my life. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it, and you start taking your power back, choice by choice, response by response, moment by moment. Let's talk about a specifically American context where this is desperately needed right now. The workplace, especially in our toxic hustle culture where boundaries are blurred, where you're expected to be always available, always responsive, where your boss texts you at 10 p.m., emails you on weekends, expects immediate responses, and most people react unconsciously to this. They respond immediately because they feel they have to, because they're afraid of the consequences, because everyone else does. But that's giving away your freedom. That's letting someone else control your time, your peace, your life. But what if you chose your response? What if you decided, I'm going to set boundaries that are healthy for me? I'm not going to respond to work messages after 7 p.m. unless it's a genuine emergency. And if there are consequences to that decision, I'll deal with those consequences. But I'm not going to voluntarily surrender my freedom. I'm not going to let my job control every hour of my life. That's choosing your response. That's exercising your freedom. And yes, there might be consequences, but there are consequences to every choice, including the choice to have no boundaries, the consequence of burnout, of destroyed relationships, of losing yourself. And when you're choosing your responses consciously, you get to decide which consequences you're willing to accept rather than just unconsciously accepting whatever consequences come from reactive behavior. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be tattooed on every American's forearm. He said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you'll find strength. He's telling you to stop wasting your energy trying to control things you can't control and put all your energy into the one thing you can control, which is your response, your interpretation, your attitude, your choices. That's your domain. That's your kingdom. And when you fully claim that kingdom, when you stop trying to control everything else and focus entirely on controlling yourself, you become powerful in a way that external circumstances can never touch. Here's what true freedom looks like in practice. They can control your job, but they cannot control your mind. They cannot control whether you do excellent work because you have standards for yourself. They cannot control whether you maintain your integrity when others are compromising theirs. They cannot control whether you treat people with kindness and respect. They cannot control whether you're looking for better opportunities. They cannot control what you do with your evenings and weekends. To build the life you actually want, those choices are yours. They can control the economy, the job market, whether you get hired or fired, but they cannot control your work ethic, your willingness to learn, your creativity, your persistence, your ability to adapt, your attitude in the face of setbacks. Those are yours. They can control whether they love you back, whether they stay or leave, whether they treat you well or poorly, but they cannot control whether you love yourself, whether you maintain your dignity, whether you stay true to your values, whether you heal and grow from the experience, whether you remain open-hearted despite being hurt, whether you choose forgiveness or bitterness. Those choices are yours, always yours. They can control the diagnosis, the prognosis, the medical circumstances, but they cannot control how you face it, whether you face it with courage or despair, whether you let it define your entire existence or just one part of your story, whether you become bitter or find unexpected gifts in a hardship, whether you give up or keep living fully however much time you have. Those responses are yours to choose. This is what the Stoics meant by freedom, not political freedom, not the freedom to do whatever you want without consequences, but the freedom to choose who you are and how you show up regardless of what's happening around you, the freedom to maintain your values when everyone else is compromising, the freedom to stay calm when everyone else is panicking, the freedom to be kind when others are cruel, the freedom to keep your dignity when circumstances are degrading. That's real freedom. That's unshakable freedom. Because it doesn't depend on external conditions. It only depends on you, on your choices, on your commitment to choosing your responses rather than just reacting unconsciously. And here's the final piece that makes this so powerful. When you start living this way, when you start consistently choosing your responses rather than being controlled by your reactions, something shifts in how you see yourself. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances. You stop feeling helpless and powerless. You start recognizing your agency, your strength, your capability, and that changes everything because confident, powerful, free people don't come from lives where everything went perfectly. They come from lives where they learn to choose their responses no matter what happened. They come from practicing this discipline day after day, choice after choice, until it becomes who they are, until their freedom becomes so fundamental that nothing external can shake it. And that's what's available to you, starting right now, starting with the next thing that happens to you, starting with the choice you make in response to this message. You are free. You have always been free. You just have to claim it. You just have to practice it. You just have to remember that between what happens and how you respond, there is a space. And in that space is your power, your freedom, your humanity, and nobody can take that from you unless you give it away. Remember death to value life, memento mori. I need you to think about something right now that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, something uncomfortable, something that American culture tells you not to think about, but something the Stoics consider the most important practice of all. You're going to die, not someday in some distant abstract future, but actually, certainly, inevitably, you're going to die maybe in 50 years, maybe in 5 years, maybe tomorrow. You don't know when, nobody knows when, and this isn't meant to be morbid or depressing. This is meant to wake you up because the awareness of death, the regular contemplation of your mortality, is the most clarifying, liberating, life-giving practice you can possibly engage in. And this is what the Stoics call memento mori. Remember death. Remember that you will die, not to make you sad, but to make you alive, not to fill you with fear, but to fill you with urgency and gratitude and clarity about what actually matters. Marcus Aurelius, every single morning, would remind himself that he might not see the evening, that this could be his last day. And he didn't do this to be dark or pessimistic. He did it because it made him present. It made him appreciate what he had. It made him stop wasting time on petty bullshit, on ego games, on grudges and resentments, and all the small-minded concerns that feel so important when you're living like you have forever, but reveal themselves as completely meaningless when you remember you don't. He wrote in his journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." And that's not a threat. That's an invitation to live with the awareness that your time is finite, precious, irreplaceable, and therefore you need to be intentional about how you spend it, about what you give your attention to, about what you allow to disturb your peace. Because you don't have time to waste on things that don't matter. None of us do. We just pretend we do. We live like we're immortal, like there will always be more time, more chances, more tomorrows, and that delusion, that's what makes us waste our lives. That's what makes us take everything for granted. That's what makes us put off the important things while we obsess over the urgent but ultimately meaningless things. In America right now, we have this incredibly toxic relationship with death. We deny it, we hide it, we medicalize it. We talk about it in euphemisms if we talk about it at all. Someone doesn't die, they pass away. They are no longer with us. We put dying people in hospitals and nursing homes where we don't have to see them. We have entire industries built around making us look younger, feel younger, pretend we're not aging, pretend we're not mortal. And the result of all this denial is that we're disconnected from the reality of our lives. We're sleepwalking through our days, taking everything for granted, putting off what matters, living in this weird limbo where intellectually we know we're going to die, but emotionally we live like we won't, like we have unlimited time, and that disconnect, that's killing us in a different way. It's making us waste a life we have worry about things that won't matter when we're on our deathbed. The Stoics took the complete opposite approach. They said look at death directly, contemplate it regularly, not obsessively, not morbidly, but honestly, as a fact of life, as the one certainty, and use that awareness to live better, to live more fully, to stop wasting your precious, limited, irreplaceable time on things that don't actually matter. Seneca wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short time." He's saying live each day as if it might be your last, not in a reckless why-well-oh way, but in a way where you're present, where you're intentional, where you're not taking anything for granted, where you're living according to your values, where you're saying the things that need to be said, where you're appreciating what you have, where you're not putting off what's important because you think you'll have time later, because you might not. None of us might. Let me make this real for you in a way that might be uncomfortable but necessary. Think about your parents. If they're still alive, how many more times are you actually going to see them? Let's say you see them 4 times a year and they live another 15 years. That's 60 more times 60. That's it. You could count them on your fingers and toes and have some left over. 60 more conversations, 60 more hugs, 60 more chances of telling you love them or to heal whatever needs healing. And you're wasting some of those visits on your phone. You're wasting some of them being irritated about old patterns. You're wasting some of them being too busy, too distracted, too caught up in your own drama to be present. And one day, and this day is coming whether you think about it or not, one of those visits will be the last one. And you won't know it's the last one when it's happening. And all those wasted visits, all those times you're physically there, but mentally somewhere else, you're going to wish you could have them back. You're going to wish you'd been present. You've been grateful. You'd really seen them, really connected with them. But you can't get them back. Time only moves in one direction. So the Stoics would say, remember death. Remember that your time with your parents is limited. And let that awareness make you present now. Make you grateful now. Make you intentional now. Not after they're gone. Not when it's too late, now. Or think about your kids. If you have them, they're only going to be young once. You get about 940 Saturdays from the time they're born until they leave for college. 940. And you're probably already through a bunch of them. And you can't get them back. You can't rewind. You can't go back and be more present, be more patient, be more playful. Put down your phone. Skip the work emergency that felt so important at the time. So what are you going to do with the Saturdays you have left? Are you going to be present, or are you going to be distracted? Are you going to really be there? Or are you going to be mentally at work, mentally on your phone, mentally somewhere else, wishing you were somewhere else? Memento mori. Remember that these Saturdays are finite. Remember that one day, sooner than you think, your kid isn't going to want to hang out with you on Saturday. They're going to be gone, living their own life, and you're going to miss these days so much it hurts. So be here now, be present now, because this moment right now, this is the only moment you actually have. And what about your marriage, your relationship? If you have one, how many more date nights do you have? How many more ordinary evenings sitting on the couch together? How many more inside jokes? How many more Sunday mornings? How many more chances to really see each other, to really connect, to forgive the small stuff, to say I love you and mean it, to be present instead of just coexisting? You don't know, you can't know. Relationships end, people die. Life is uncertain, and you're wasting some of this precious time being annoyed about dishes, being passive-aggressive about whose turn it is to take out the trash, holding grudges about things that won't matter at all when one of you is gone. And the person who's gone might be you. You might not get the reconciliation, the makeup, the moment where it all gets better. This moment, the one you're in right now, might be all you have. So the Stoics would say, remember death, yours and theirs, and let that awareness help you drop the petty stuff, help you appreciate what you have, help you show up with love and presence and forgiveness while you still can. Now let's talk about your career, your work, all the stress and anxiety and long hours and politics and drama, and ask yourself this. If you found out you had 6 months to live, would any of this matter? Would you care about the promotion? Would you care about what your boss thinks of you? Would you care about that email that needs to be sent? that meeting that got rescheduled, that colleague who annoyed you, that project that's behind schedule? No, none of it would matter. You have absolute clarity about what actually matters: relationships, experiences, love, presence, making peace with people, doing things that bring you joy, contributing something meaningful, if you can, but not stressing about status or achievement or impressing anyone. And here's the thing. You do have 6 months to live, maybe more, maybe less. You just don't know the timeline. But the finitude is the same. Your life is temporary. Your time is limited. So why are you living as if this work drama matters? Why are you sacrificing your health, your relationships, your peace, your actual life for things that won't matter when you're dying? Memento mori. Remember you're going to die, and let that remembering give you perspective, give you priorities, give you the courage to set boundaries, to say no to things that don't align with what actually matters, to stop wasting your one wild and precious life on bullshit. The Stoics would contemplate death in very specific ways. They would imagine their own funeral. Who would be there? What would people say about them? What would they wish they'd done differently? And they'd use that contemplation not to be morbid, but to course correct now, to live in a way that they'd be proud of, to become the person they want to be remembered as, not someday, not eventually, but today, because today might be all you get. And even if you get more days, this day still matters. This day is your life, not preparation for life, not waiting for life to start. This is it. This is your life happening right now. And if you're not present for it, if you're not appreciating it, if you're not living it intentionally, then you're already dead in the ways that matter most. There's this Buddhist saying that the problem is you think you have time. And that's exactly right. That's the delusion. We all think we have time. We think we'll get around to it. We think there will be a better moment, a more convenient time. We put off the trip we want to take, the conversation we need to have, the forgiveness we need to offer, the dream we want to pursue, the change we want to make. We put it all off because we think there will be time later. But there might not be. Steve Jobs died at 56. Kobe Bryant died at 41. People die young. People die suddenly. People die before they're ready, before they said what they needed to say, before they've done what they wanted to do. And they all thought they had more time. We all think we have more time, but we don't know that. We can't know that. So the Stoics say act accordingly, live accordingly, stop putting off what matters, stop wasting your limited, precious, irreplaceable life on things that don't matter. And here's where this practice becomes incredibly clarifying. When you regularly contemplate your death, when you ask yourself, if I died today, would I be satisfied with how I lived? Would I have regrets? What would they be? Those questions cut through all the noise, all the societal expectations, all the should-dos and supposed-tos, and they reveal what actually matters to you, not what's supposed to matter, not what matters to other people, but what matters to you. And often there's a gap, a big gap, between how you're living and what actually matters to you. You're spending 8 hours a day on work that doesn't fulfill you in 30 minutes with your kids. You're spending more time on social media than in nature. You're maintaining relationships out of obligation that drain you and neglecting relationships that nourish you. You're saying yes to things that don't matter and no to things that do. And the contemplation of death reveals all of this, shows you clearly where you're off track, and gives you the urgency to correct course, to realign your life with your values, to start living in a way that you won't regret when you're out of time. The other thing that contemplating death does is it fills you with gratitude, because when you remember that all of this is temporary, that you could lose it all at any moment, you stop taking for granted. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. The mundane becomes precious. Your morning coffee, the feeling of the sun on your face, the sound of your kid laughing, the comfort of your bed, the ability to walk, to see, to breathe, to be here, all of it is a gift. All of it is temporary. And when you remember that, when you really feel it, you're flooded with gratitude, not in a forced, toxic positivity way, but in a genuine, heartfelt, this is amazing way, you're alive. Right now, you're alive. You get to experience this day, this moment. And yeah, maybe things aren't perfect. Maybe you have problems. Maybe life is hard, but you're here. You're alive. You get to try. You get to love. You get to experience this weird, beautiful, painful, incredible thing called being human. And that won't last forever. So appreciate it now. Feel it now. Be present for it now. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself that everything he loved was temporary. His children would grow up and leave or die. His wife would die. his empire would fall. Even his own body would decay and return to dust. What do I want to let go of? And then live that way, as much as you can, imperfectly, but intentionally, and at the end of each day reflect, if I died tonight, would I be satisfied with today? Did I live according to my values? Did I appreciate what I have? Did I love the people I love? Did I waste time on things that don't matter? What I want to do differently tomorrow? That's the practice, simple but profound. And if you do it consistently, it will change your life. It will give you clarity and courage and gratitude and presence. It will help you stop sweating the small stuff because you'll have perspective on what's actually small. It will help you be braver because what are you afraid of? You're going to die anyway. Might as well try. Might as well love. Might as well really live. It will help you forgive because holding grudges is a waste of your limited time. It will help you appreciate the ordinary because the ordinary is actually extraordinary when you remember it won't last forever. And it will help you live without regret because you're not putting anything off. You're not waiting for someday. You're living now, fully, presently, intentionally, according to your values. And when your time comes, whenever that is, you'll be ready, you'll be at peace. Because you didn't waste your life, you lived it, really lived it. And that's all any of us can do. That's all any of us should do. Remember death. Remember your time is limited. And let that remembering be the thing that finally wakes you up and helps you really live. Inner peace is built daily, not found once. Here's the final truth that ties everything together. The truth that most people in modern America desperately need to hear, but don't want to accept because it requires work. Consistent work, daily work. And we've been sold this lie that peace is something you find, something you achieve, something you arrive at. Like one day you'll read the right book or take the right vacation or reach the right income level or meet the right person or have the right breakthrough in therapy and suddenly everything will click into place and you'll be peaceful forever. You'll have figured it all out. You'll be done. But that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. Peace is not a destination you reach and then you're finished. Peace is a practice, a discipline, a daily commitment to showing up and doing the work regardless of how you feel. Regardless of what's happening, regardless of whether you feel like it. And this is what separates the Stoics from motivational speakers, from self-help gurus, from everyone selling you quick fixes and easy answers. The Stoics weren't giving you inspiring quotes to post on Instagram. They were giving you a training program, a daily practice, a way of life that requires showing up every single day and doing the work of managing your mind, examining your thoughts, questioning your reactions, aligning your actions with your values, and building brick by brick, day by day, the inner fortress that nothing external can shake. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his Meditations as a book for publication. He wrote it as a private journal, daily reminders to himself. And if you read it, you'll notice he's repeating himself constantly, saying the same things over and over in different ways. And that's not because he forgot what he wrote yesterday. It's because he understood that knowing something once doesn't mean you've integrated it. Reading something once doesn't mean you've internalized it. You have to come back to these principles again and again. You have to remind yourself daily. You have to practice daily because your default mode, the mode you slip into when you're not paying attention, is chaos, is reactivity, is being controlled by external circumstances and unconscious patterns. And the only way to override that default mode is through consistent daily practice. There are no shortcuts. There are no hacks. There's just the work, and the work is daily. In America right now, we've got this obsession with optimization, with finding the one thing that will fix everything, the perfect morning routine, the perfect meditation app, the perfect productivity system, the perfect diet, the perfect anything. And people jump from thing to thing, trying this for a week, trying that for a month, always looking for the magic bullet. The thing that will finally give them the peace and clarity and success they're looking for. But they're missing the point entirely. It's not about finding the perfect system. It's about committing to a practice and doing it daily, imperfectly, inconsistently sometimes, but coming back to it again and again, because the power is in the practice itself. The power is in the consistency, in the repetition, in showing up day after day, even when you don't feel like it, even when it seems like it's not working, even when you had a bad day and fallen back into old patterns. You wake up the next morning and you practice again. That's where the transformation happens, not in the perfect execution, but in the persistent return. The Stoics had specific daily practices, And these weren't complicated. They weren't time-consuming. They were simple, sustainable, repeatable, and they did them every day, no exceptions, no days off, because they understood that your mind is like a garden. If you tend it daily, it flourishes. If you neglect it even for a short time, weeds take over, and then you're back to square one, back to being reactive, back to being controlled by circumstances, back to suffering unnecessarily. One of the core Stoic practices was morning meditation. Not meditation in the modern sense of sitting quietly trying to empty your mind, but active contemplation. Sitting down first thing in the morning and reminding yourself of Stoic principles, preparing yourself mentally for the day ahead. Marcus Aurelius would tell himself, "Today I will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, envious, and antisocial. They are like this because they don't know good from bad." He wasn't being pessimistic. He was preparing himself. He was deciding ahead of time how he would respond to difficulty. He was priming his mind to stay calm, to stay centered, to not be surprised or thrown off when people acted badly. And you can do the same thing every morning, before you check your phone, before you dive into the chaos of the day. Take 5 minutes, sit down, remind yourself of what you can control and what you can't. Remind yourself that your peace depends on your response, not on circumstances. Remind yourself of your values. Decide who you want to be today, how you want to show up, and mentally rehearse staying calm when things go wrong. Because things will go wrong. They always do. And if you prepared for it, if you reminded yourself of your principles, you're way more likely to actually live them when the moment comes. Another core practice was evening reflection. At the end of each day, sitting down and reviewing the day that just happened, asking yourself specific questions. Where did I live according to my values today, and where did I fall short? When did I get emotionally hijacked and react instead of respond? What triggered me and why? What could I have done better? What am I grateful for from today? And this isn't about beating yourself up. It's not about perfectionism or self-criticism. It's about learning. It's about getting to know yourself, understanding your patterns, your triggers, your weaknesses, so you can work on them. Seneca would tell his students to examine each day like a judge examining evidence, not harshly but honestly, and he'd say, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." Because if you don't reflect, if you don't examine your day, you'll just keep making the same mistakes, reacting the same ways, falling into the same patterns. You won't learn, you won't grow. You'll just repeat the same day over and over with different details. But when you reflect daily, when you honestly assess your actions and reactions, you start to notice patterns. You start to catch yourself earlier. You start to make different choices. And gradually, over time, you become the person you want to be, not through some sudden transformation, but through daily small adjustments, daily course corrections, daily practice. Journaling was absolutely central to Stoic practice, and not journaling as in Dear Diary, here's what happened today, but journaling as in working through your thoughts on paper, examining your beliefs, questioning your interpretations, processing your emotions, clarify your values. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations is literally his journal, his daily practice of writing to himself, reminding himself of principles, working through challenges. And you should do the same every day, even if it's just 10 minutes, right? And don't write for anyone else. Don't write for Instagram or for some future reader. Write for yourself. Write to understand yourself. Write to challenge your thoughts. Write to process your emotions. Write to remind yourself of what matters. Because writing forces clarity. When you just think about something, your thoughts can be vague, circular, confused. But when you have to write it down, you have to organize it. You have to make it clear. And in that process of making it clear on paper, it often becomes clear in your mind. You see things you didn't see before. You recognize patterns you didn't recognize before. You find solutions you didn't find before. And over time, your journal becomes a record of your growth, a testament to your practice, proof that you're not the same person you were a year ago, that the daily work is working, that you're evolving slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. The Stoics also practice what they call view from above, which is a contemplative exercise where you zoom out. You imagine yourself from a distance, from above. You see yourself in your city in your state in your country on the planet in the solar system, the galaxy, and you realize how small your problems are in the grand scheme of things. how temporary, how insignificant, not in a nihilistic way, but in a liberating way, because most of what you stress about doesn't matter at all when you see it from this perspective. And this practice, this daily zooming out, helps you maintain perspective, helps you not get lost in the drama, helps you remember what actually matters and what's just noise. And you can do this anytime, whenever you're stressed, whenever you're caught up in some problem that feels overwhelming. Just zoom out, see yourself from above, see your problem in the context of all of human history, all of the universe, and feel it shrink, feel it become manageable, feel your peace return because you regain perspective. Another practice was negative visualization, which we talked about earlier, but it's worth repeating because it's so powerful and so misunderstood. Every day, the Stoics would imagine losing what they had, losing their health, their wealth, their loved ones, their life, not to be morbid, but to appreciate what they had while they had it, to not take anything for granted, to prepare themselves emotionally for loss, so they wouldn't be destroyed by it when it came. And this daily practice of imagining loss created profound gratitude, because when you regularly contemplate losing something, when you actually feel what that would be like, you come back to your actual life with fresh eyes, with appreciation, with presence. You hug your kids a little tighter. You really taste your coffee. You notice the beauty that's been there all along, but you'd stop seeing because you'd taken for granted. And this isn't pessimism. This is realism combined with gratitude. This is acknowledging that everything is temporary and letting that acknowledgement wake you up to the preciousness of now. The Stoics practice self-denial regularly, voluntarily choosing discomfort, as we discussed, but doing it as a daily practice, not just occasionally. Seneca would eat simple food regularly, sleep on a hard bed regularly, wear simple clothes regularly, not as punishment but as training, as a way of maintaining his independence from luxury, his tolerance for discomfort, his confidence that he could handle hardship. And you should do something similar every day. Choose some small discomfort. Take a cold shower, skip dessert, exercise when you don't feel like it. Do something that's slightly hard, slightly uncomfortable, because you're training yourself, you're building resilience, you're proving to yourself daily that you can handle discomfort, that you can choose discipline over impulse, that you're not a slave to your cravings and preferences. And that daily practice, that daily victory over your own resistance, that builds strength, real strength, the kind that will serve you when life gets actually hard. And conscious breathing. This is something the Stoics didn't talk about explicitly, but is implied in all their teachings about maintaining calm, about staying present, and modern science has validated how powerful breath work is for regulating your nervous system, for staying calm under pressure, for being present instead of lost in thought. So make this part of your daily practice. Multiple times throughout the day, just stop, take 3 deep breaths, notice your body, notice where you're holding tension, notice your thoughts without getting caught up in them. Return to the present moment, return to your body, return to your breath. This takes 10 seconds. You can do it anywhere. And if you do it regularly throughout the day, you'll notice you're more present, more calm, more capable of choosing your response instead of just reacting. Because you practice coming back to center, you practice regulating yourself, and it becomes a habit, a reflex, something you do automatically when stress arises instead of automatically spiraling. But here's the thing that's absolutely critical to understand. All of these practices, morning meditation, evening reflection, journaling, view from above, negative visualization, voluntary discomfort, conscious breathing, none of them work if you do them once. None of them work if you do them when you feel like it. They only work if you do them daily, consistently, as a discipline, as a non-negotiable part of your life, like brushing your teeth, like eating, like sleeping, because your mind needs daily maintenance, daily training, daily reminding. Just like your body needs daily food and rest, your mind needs daily practice. And if you neglect it, if you think you can just practice when you're in crisis, when things are falling apart, it won't work. It's like try to build muscle by going to the gym once a year when you need to move something heavy. You can't do it. The strength has to be built in advance through consistent practice. And the same is true for inner peace, for emotional resilience, for all of these Stoic qualities. They're built through daily practice, through showing up every day and doing the work even when you don't feel like it, even when it seems like it's not making a difference, even when you fall back into old patterns. You keep practicing, you keep showing up, because this is how transformation happens, not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through boring, consistent, daily practice, And the beautiful thing is that it compounds. Every day you practice, you're a tiny bit stronger, a tiny bit more resilient, a tiny bit more peaceful, and you don't notice it day to day. But if you look back after 6 months, after a year, after 5 years of daily practice, you're a completely different person. You're unrecognizable from who you were, not because of some peak experience or some perfect moment of enlightenment, but because you showed up every single day and did the work. And that's what the Stoics understood. That's what modern self. Help culture gets wrong. There's no arrival. There's no done. There's only practice. Only the daily discipline of tending your mind, examining your thoughts, aligning your actions with your values, choosing your responses, and building, day by day, the inner peace that no external circumstance can disturb, because it's not based on circumstances. It's based on practice, on discipline, on your commitment to showing up every day and doing the work. And that commitment, that discipline, that's what sets you free. That's what gives you peace. Not peace as in everything is perfect and you never feel difficult emotions, but peace as in you know you can handle whatever comes. You know you're living according to your values. You know you're doing the work. And that knowledge, that confidence, that's unshakable because it's earned through daily practice, through daily discipline, through showing up again and again and again. And if you take nothing else from this entire audiobook, take this. Inner peace is not a destination. It's not something you find once and then you're done. Inner peace is a discipline, a daily practice, a lifelong commitment to showing up and doing the work of being human, of managing your mind, of living intentionally. And it's available to you starting today, starting right now. Not because you figured everything out, not because you're perfect, not because circumstances are ideal, but because you've decided to practice. You've decided to show up daily. You've decided that your peace is worth the work. And that decision, that commitment, that's where everything changes. That's where you finally stop looking outside yourself for what you need to build inside yourself all along. So here we are at the end of this journey through ancient wisdom. But really, this isn't the end at all. This is just the beginning. Because everything we've talked about, every principle, every practice, every insight, none of it means anything unless you actually do something with it. Unless you take what you've learned here and apply it to your actual life, starting today, starting right now. Because that's what the Stoics would tell you. They wouldn't pat you on the back for listening to this audiobook. They wouldn't congratulate you for understanding the concepts. They'd ask you one simple question. What are you going to do differently today? Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. It's just intellectual masturbation. It's just another way to avoid actually doing the hard work of changing your life. And you didn't come this far. You didn't invest this time to walk away with nothing but a few nice ideas that make you feel good for a day and then fade away like every other self-help thing you've tried. No, you came here because something in you knows that you need to change, that you can't keep living the way you've been living, that the anxiety, the stress, the emptiness, the constant feeling of not being enough, it's not sustainable, it's not okay, and it doesn't have to be this way. There's another way, the way the Stoics discovered 2,000 years ago, and that's just as relevant, just as powerful, just as transformative today as it was then, maybe even more so, because we need it more desperately than ever. Let's recap what we've covered, not to repeat ourselves, but to crystallize it, to make it actionable, to give you a clear path forward, because that's what matters now. Not what you know, but what you do. First, we talk about controlling what you can and releasing what you can't. And this is the foundation of everything. This is where peace begins, with the radical acceptance that most of what happens in life is outside your control. But your response, your effort, your character, that's always within your control. And when you stop wasting energy on things you can't control and focus entirely on things you can, you become powerful in a way that external circumstances can never touch. So your practice is this. Every time you feel stressed or anxious, pause and ask yourself, is this within my control? If it's not, let it go, release it. Focus on what you can actually influence. And if it is within your control, then act. Do what's yours to do and then release attachment to the outcome. Second, we talked about how your mind creates your suffering, how it's not events that disturb you, but your judgment about events. And this is liberating because it means you have power. You can change your suffering by changing your interpretations, your stories, your judgments. So your practice is this. When something happens that upsets you, pause and ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this? Is the story true? Is there another way to interpret this situation? And then consciously choose an interpretation that's more accurate and more helpful, because you're not a prisoner of your first thought. You're the author of your own narrative. Third, we talk about emotional strength as a skill, not a personality trait. Something you build through practice, not something you're born with or without. And your practice is this. When strong emotions arise, don't suppress them and don't be controlled by them. Instead, create space between the emotion and your response. Feel the emotion, name it, acknowledge it, and then choose how you want to respond. And every time you do this, every time you choose your response instead of just reacting, you're building emotional mastery. You're strengthening that muscle. And over time, you become unshakable, not because you don't feel things, but because you're not controlled by what you feel. Fourth, we talked about detaching from outcomes and committing to effort. And this is so counter to modern hustle culture, but so essential for peace. Because when you tie your happiness to outcomes you don't fully control, you're setting yourself up for anxiety and disappointment. So your practice is this. Give everything to process, to your effort, to showing up with excellence and integrity, and then release attachment to the result. Do your absolute best, and then make peace with. However it turns out, because the outcome was never fully yours to control anyway, but the effort, the character you demonstrate, that's yours. That's what matters. That's what you can be proud of regardless of results. Fifth, we talked about practicing voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing discomfort to build resilience, to break your dependence on comfort, to prove to yourself that you can handle hard things. So your practice is this. Every day, choose some small discomfort, a cold shower, a workout that's challenging, skipping something you crave, sitting with boredom instead of immediately distracting yourself. Because you're training your tolerance for discomfort, you're building strength, and when life gets actually hard, you'll be ready because you've practiced. You've proven to yourself that you can handle discomfort and be okay. Sixth, we talk about how external success will never fix inner chaos, how no amount of achievement or recognition or wealth or status can give you peace if your mind is disturbed, if you haven't done the internal work. So your practice is this. Stop looking outside yourself for validation, for worth, for peace, and start building it inside yourself through self-reflection, through therapy if you need it, through healing old wounds, through developing a healthy relationship with yourself. That's not dependent on external circumstances. Do the internal work first, or at least simultaneously with external ambition, because success without peace is just a more expensive kind of suffering. Seventh, we talk about choosing your response as the ultimate freedom, how regardless of what happens to you, you always have the power to choose how you respond. And in that choice lies your freedom, your power, your humanity. So your practice is this. Create space between stimulus and response. When something happens, pause, even just for 3 seconds, and ask yourself, how do I want to respond to this? What response would I respect? And then choose, consciously choose. Don't just react automatically, because in that choice, in that conscious response, that's where you reclaim your power from circumstances, from other people, from everything external. Eighth, we talk about memento mori, remembering death. Contemplate your mortality, not to be morbid, but to wake yourself up, to appreciate what you have, to stop wasting time on things that don't matter, to live with urgency and intention and gratitude. So your practice is this. Every morning, remind yourself that you're going to die, that this might be your last day, that everyone you love is mortal, that all of this is temporary, and let that awareness guide how you live today. What you prioritize, what you appreciate, what you let go of, because when you remember death, you remember life, you remember what actually matters. And ninth, we talk about how inner peace is built daily, not found once, how it's not a destination but a discipline, how you have to show up every single day and do the work, the morning meditation, the evening reflection, the journaling, the practices, because your mind needs daily maintenance, daily training, daily reminding, and the transformation happens not through peak experiences, but through boring, consistent daily practice. So your practice is this. Commit to a daily routine, even if it's just 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night. Commit to showing up every day and doing the work, imperfectly, inconsistently sometimes, but coming back, always coming back, because that's where the power is, in the consistency, in the repetition, in the daily discipline of building the peace that no circumstance can disturb. And now, right now, you have a choice. You can close this audiobook, feel inspired for a day or two, and then go back to exactly how you were living before, back to the anxiety, back to the stress, back to the endless searching for peace in all the wrong places. Or you could decide right now that something changes today, that you can take one principle, just one, and practice it today, that you're going to start building your peace brick by brick, day by day, through discipline, through practice, through showing up and doing the work. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's not going to be easy. You're going to forget, you're going to fall back into old patterns. You're going to have days where you feel like you're making no progress. But if you keep showing up, if you keep practicing, if you commit to this as a daily discipline, you will change, fundamentally change, and 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, you'll look back and barely recognize the person. You were today the anxious, stressed, overwhelmed person who was searching desperately for peace, because you'll have found it not out there, but in here, not by changing your circumstances, but by changing your response to your circumstances, not by achieving more, but by needing less, not by getting everything you want, but by wanting what you have. And that peace, that freedom, that's what the Stoics are offering you. That's what's waiting for you on the other side of this practice. But you have to do the work. Nobody can do it for you. I can't do it for you. This audiobook can't do it for you. You have to show up. You have to practice. You have to commit. And if you do, I promise you, your life will never be the same. You'll be calmer, stronger, more present, more grateful, more free. Not because your circumstances change, but because you change. And that's the only change that really matters. That's the only change that lasts. That's the ancient secret to inner peace. Not a secret at all, really, just a practice, just a discipline, just a daily commitment to showing up and doing the work of being human, of managing your mind, of living intentionally. And it's available to you, starting today, starting right now. So take a breath, choose one practice, just one, and commit to doing it today, and then tomorrow, and then the next day. And watch what happens. Watch yourself transform. Watch your peace grow. Watch your life change from the inside out, because that's how it works. That's how it's always worked. Inner peace is not a destination. It's a discipline, and the discipline starts now. And listen, if this audiobook resonated with you, if these ancient principles spoke to something deep inside you, if you found value in what we covered here, I want to ask you to do something for me. Actually, do it for yourself and for everyone else who's searching for what you just found. Take 10 seconds right now and hit that like button, because it tells the algorithm that this content matters, that people need this, and it helps this message reach more people who are struggling, just like you were. People who are lying awake at 2 a.m. searching for answers. People who are exhausted from chasing peace in all the wrong places. And maybe, just maybe, this audiobook will find them and change their life the way it's about to change yours. And then drop a comment below. Tell me which principle hit you the hardest, which practice you're going to start with, what your biggest takeaway was. Because I read every single comment, and your insights, your experiences, they help this community grow. They help other people see that they're not alone in this struggle, and sometimes just knowing that other people are doing this work, that other people are on this journey, that's enough to keep you going on the days when it feels hard. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Bit-Sized Book English, because we're just getting started. We're diving deep into the books, the philosophies, the ancient wisdom and modern science that actually work, that actually transform lives. No fluff, no filler, just substance, just practices, just content that will make you better, stronger, more peaceful. And I don't want you to miss what's coming next. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, become part of this community of people who are done with surface-level self-help and ready for real transformation. And finally, share this. Please share this audiobook with someone who needs it. And you know someone who needs it. We all know someone who's struggling, who's anxious, who's stressed, who's searching for peace. Send them this link, text it to them, post it on your social media. Because this isn't just information. This is a lifeline. This could be the thing that changes someone's life. That gives them hope, that shows them there's another way. And what a gift that would be. What an impact you could have just by sharing this message. So please take a moment. Think of someone who needs this and share it with them. You might be saving their life, literally saving their life, because you're giving them tools to save themselves, tools that have worked for thousands of years, tools that will work for them if they practice them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing this time. Thank you for being willing to do the work. Because that's what this takes: willingness, commitment, discipline, and you've taken the first step just by listening. Now take the second step: practice. Today, right now. Choose one principle and live it, and then tomorrow do it again, and the day after that, and watch your life transform. Watch your peace grow. Watch yourself become the person you've always wanted to be. Calm in chaos. Strong in adversity. Free in any circumstance. That's what's waiting for you. That's what you're building, one day, one practice, one choice at a time. So go live it, practice it, be it, and I'll see you in the next audiobook. Until then, remember, inner peace is not a destination. It's a discipline. Now go build yours. And thank you for listening.